What happens when a polished daytime host tries to keep things civil, and a royal who renounced the palace brings the palace attitude anyway? What began as a soft-focus chat on the Tamron Hall show detonated into a studio-stopping clash, the kind that turns polite applause into breathless silence. Today, we revisit the moment a conversation about healing became a duel about pride, power, and public truth, and ended with a royal storming toward the exit while the host finally lost her composure. The camera drifted across the audience like a tide of light, catching nervous smiles and glossy stares before settling on the sleek desk, and the woman who owned it. Tamron Hall sat poised, the embodiment of calm, shoulders square, eyes bright, palms open in welcome. Her voice was low and warm, the kind that makes people confess without realizing they've begun. "Your Royal Highness, Prince Harry, thank you for being here," she said with a faint wink that softened the formality. "We're honored." Harry entered to generous applause, that familiar half-smile tilted like a shield. Tailored suit, unhurried stride, a nod that suggested he was granting the room permission to exhale. He shook Tamron's hand as though the gesture itself were a favor. When he sat, he adjusted his cuff and scanned the crowd with the cool confidence of someone used to rooms bending. "Please," he said smoothly, always happy to help elevate the conversation. The early questions were gentle, crafted with care. His foundation's latest initiative, a veterans program he'd launched, a new docuseries on resilience. Harry's answers were polished and expansive. Less conversation, more keynote. He spoke of cultural shifts, legacy systems, the alchemy of telling one's truth. The audience nodded, lulled by cadence and charisma. Tamron smiled. "You've used your platform to speak openly about mental health. Was there a specific moment that made you decide to go public?" Harry's smile cooled a degree. "I wouldn't reduce it to a moment," he said, brushing non-existent lint from his knee. "It's a continuum. I've always understood, perhaps more than most, the weight of expectation. Sharing that understanding is leadership." Tamron inclined her head. "Leadership can be lonely. How do you balance the need for privacy with your level of visibility?" "Privacy isn't absence," he replied. "It's authorship. The difference seems to confuse people." A faint murmur rippled through the audience. "Fair point," Tamron said evenly. "Still, some might wonder if authorship can start to look like control. For example, the book—" Harry exhaled, a short humorless laugh. "We're not doing the book question again, are we? I've addressed it 1,000 times. It mattered. That's why people read it." "They did," Tamron said. "And because they read it, they have questions." Her tone stayed calm, deliberate. "You said the book was about healing. Do you feel healed?" "Healing isn't a destination," Harry said, gaze lifting toward the lights. "But I'm certainly ahead of anyone still asking if it was worth it." The line landed like a coin tossed to a street musician, bright, dismissive. The audience tittered uncertainly. Tamron's smile tightened just enough to notice. "Let's talk about impact then," she said. "Do you think any of your public choices have complicated relationships you might want to keep private?" "My private relationships," he said, "are private because I choose that. Complication happens when people who aren't part of them try to narrate them. On daytime television." The words were velvet-wrapped, the edge unmistakable. Tamron let the silence bloom, then folded it neatly. "Understood. Let's stay with what you do want to narrate. You've criticized the British press and certain palace protocols. Is there anything you wish you'd handled differently?" Harry leaned back, entirely at ease. "I handled things exactly as they demanded to be handled. Sometimes truth insists." "And when truth insists," Tamron said softly, "do you ever worry it can also wound?" Harry met her eyes. "Truth doesn't wound. Hypocrisy does." A visible ripple moved through the studio. The band leader shifted. A floor manager froze mid-step. Tamron crossed one leg over the other, the portrait of control. "You've spoken beautifully about service," she continued. "Some viewers say they're confused by the tension between service and the commercial side. Streaming deals, speaking tours, branding. How do you define service now?" Harry's smile returned. Bright, edged, practiced. Service, he said, is impact measured by outcomes, not optics. A deal that funds real programs is service. I'm not sure why that's difficult, Tamron said evenly. It's a sincere question. People associate royalty with duty, not business. And Tamron, Harry cut in, voice still soft but suddenly colder, if people are comfortable, it usually means nothing important is changing. Discomfort is the tax of progress. Some audiences just don't like paying taxes. A soft "oh" drifted from the crowd. Tamron nodded, absorbing the sting without wearing it. One more on that, she said. If discomfort is the tax of progress, how do you respond to those who say you've taxed family trust? That sharing private conversations erodes the possibility of reconciliation? Harry chuckled, a low, final kind of laugh. People who worry about my family's trust are rarely in my family, and reconciliation doesn't begin with silence from the person harmed. The studio air thinned, not hostile yet, but the polite scaffolding had begun to creak. Tamron folded her hands, the way a surgeon might before a delicate cut. Let's zoom in, she said. You told an audience last month that institutions rarely apologize first. If an apology did come, from the press, the palace, anyone, what would it need to say? Harry considered, eyes half-lidded, expression unreadable. It would need to say, we were wrong because we were invested in a version of you that served us. We're sorry we punished you for choosing yourself. Soft applause fluttered through the room. Tamron waited for it to fade. And if that apology never comes, then I keep choosing myself, he said simply. I've learned to do that better than most. The line hung in the air like a banner, bold, defiant. Tamron let it flutter for a beat, then reached for a new card. We're almost at the break, she said, her smile restoring the room's pulse. Afterward, I'd love to ask about your upcoming projects, and a question many viewers sent in about what accountability looks like. When stories are told from one side, Harry's brow ticked, barely perceptible. Happy to educate, he said. The word lingered. The band splashed a polite chord. Applause lights winked. As crew members moved and microphones were checked, Tamron kept her gaze on him, just long enough to register the temperature drop. The segment had started as a stroll through manicured talking points. Now it felt like a hallway narrowing toward a door neither of them intended to open. They returned from commercial with smiles reset. Tamron thanked the sponsor, the audience, the viewers at home. Her voice flowed like tranquil water over stone. Prince Harry, she began, let's talk accountability. Yours and the media's. You've asked for it loudly from others. What does it look like when it's pointed at you? Harry tilted his head, almost amused. It looks like outcomes. Programs launched. Lives improved. Conversations like this one. Moving past the shallow end. And when people ask for accountability on facts, she pressed gently, on names, timelines, receipts, Harry's gaze cooled another degree. People who deserve receipts know where to find them. A half-gasp, half-woo rippled from the audience. Tamron straightened, her composure diamond hard. She didn't raise her voice. She sharpened it. Fair, she said. Then let's bring as much clarity as we can, for those watching who don't know where to find them. He smiled without warmth. Clarity requires good faith. I hope we have that. Tamron's eyes flickered, hurt, frustration, then smoothed. We always try, she said softly. The cameras drank in the moment. Two seasoned professionals, all posture and poise, with sabers rattling just under the desk. On the monitors, it looked serene. In the studio, it felt combustible. By the time the floor manager flashed the wrap sign, nothing had exploded, but the fuse glowed bright enough for even the back row to see it. The next questions would decide whether it burned out, or burned the set down. They returned from break to another burst of applause. Though the warmth of the first segment had cooled, Tamron Hall's signature, poised smile carried her into the next question, but her eyes betrayed the calculation of someone stepping into dangerous territory. Welcome back. Everyone, she said smoothly. We're here with Prince Harry, discussing his work, his journey, and most importantly, the lessons he's learned along the way. Harry nodded, calm as ever. Harry gave the audience a faint smile that felt more like acknowledgement than gratitude. He leaned back in the plush chair, legs crossed, fingertips pressed together. He looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Tamron shuffled her cards. So, Harry, before the break, you mentioned accountability. Let's dig into that. When you ask for accountability from others, the press, even the royal family, do you feel you've shown that same accountability yourself? Especially when people point to what they call contradictions in your narrative? It was carefully worded, but Harry's smile stiffened, freezing into something more deliberate. Contradictions? He repeated, his tone faintly incredulous. You mean when the media frames my life with headlines they wrote before I even opened my mouth? That's not contradiction, Tamron. That's projection. A polite murmur rippled through the audience, uncertain whether to applaud. Tamron stayed composed. I hear you, but to be fair, it's not just headlines. Some point to moments, like asking for privacy, yet participating in high-profile interviews and projects that put private matters on the record. Harry chuckled low and sharp. Ah, the privacy paradox. How original. Haven't heard that one before. His voice dripped with sarcasm. Let me educate. Privacy means choosing what you share, not surrendering your entire life. If people can't grasp that distinction, that says more about them than it does about me. The audience shifted uneasily, some clapping, others exchanging glances. The condescension hadn't gone unnoticed. Tamron adjusted in her seat, posture still open, but her smile taut. Of course, it's a nuanced topic. But don't you think the way you communicate that nuance sometimes gets lost? Perhaps because of the tone? Harry's brow lifted. Tone? Forgive me, but maybe the issue isn't tone. Maybe it's that people aren't used to someone like me refusing to play along anymore. He leaned forward slightly. You know, Tamron, I've spent my life being told how to smile, what to say, how to behave. If I sound sharp now, it's because I've earned the right not to pander. A soft gasp rolled through the room. Tamron blinked once, slowly. She'd handled difficult guests before, but rarely a royal so openly disdainful on her stage. She softened her tone deliberately. I understand the desire to control your own story, but do you ever worry that, in defending yourself so strongly, you risk alienating people who actually want to support you? Harry's laugh came quick and clipped. People who want to support me will support me. I don't need to spoon-feed them palatable versions of my life for their comfort. If someone is so fragile that my honesty offends them, they were never true supporters to begin with. The air tightened. Even those who had clapped earlier now sat still, recalibrating their impression of him. Tamron's lips curved into her professional half-smile, but her eyes had cooled. That's one way to see it, she said. Another is that people want connection, not correction. Do you think you sometimes underestimate how your words land? Harry tilted his head, almost mocking. With respect, Tamron, people spend too much time worrying about how words land, and not enough listening to what they say. If someone misinterprets my intent, that's their burden. This time the audience offered nothing. No applause, no laughter. Just silence. Tamron folded her hands calmly in her lap, the very picture of restraint. Let me ask you this, she said. If your goal is to heal and move forward, why do so many of your public statements still focus on grievances from your past? Some might say it feels less like healing and more like reopening wounds. Harry's eyes narrowed. Grievances, he repeated, his tone sharpening. Interesting choice of word. I call it truth. And if people are uncomfortable with truth, maybe they should ask themselves why. The arrogance in his delivery was unmistakable now. He sat back again, chin slightly raised as though daring anyone to disagree. The silence deepened. Tamron inhaled, steady and precise. Her professionalism held, but the faint tightening at the corners of her mouth betrayed how close his dismissiveness had cut. Well, she said evenly, our viewers sent in a lot of questions, and one recurring theme was about family. Do you think there's a future where you reconcile publicly with them? Or do you see the distance as permanent? Harry's smirk returned, cool, self-assured, unbothered. Reconciliation isn't a performance for the public, he said. It's a process, and frankly, whether the public sees it or not, is irrelevant, giving the audience a faint smile that felt more like acknowledgement than gratitude. He leaned back in the plush chair, legs crossed, fingertips steepled, composed, almost regal in his ease. Too composed. Tamron shuffled her cards, her expression polite but watchful. "So, Harry," she began smoothly, "before the break you mentioned accountability. Let's talk about that. When you ask for accountability from others, the press, even the royal family, do you feel you've shown that same accountability yourself? Especially when it comes to what some see as contradictions in your narrative?" It was a careful question, but Harry's smile stiffened. "Contradictions?" he repeated, voice edged with disbelief. "You mean when the media writes my story before I've even spoken?" "That's not contradiction, Tamron. That's projection." A ripple of polite murmurs spread through the audience, unsure whether to clap. Tamron nodded evenly. "I understand. But it's not just headlines. Some point to the tension between your desire for privacy and the choice to share deeply personal matters in interviews and documentaries." Harry gave a low, sharp laugh. "Ah, the privacy paradox. How original. Haven't heard that one before." His tone turned cutting. "Privacy means choosing what to share, not surrendering your life entirely. If people can't grasp that distinction, it says more about them than it does about me." The audience shifted. A few claps, but more uncertainty. His condescension hung in the air. Tamron adjusted her posture, her smile professional but taut. "It's a nuanced topic," she said calmly. "But do you think that nuance sometimes gets lost? Perhaps because of tone?" Harry arched a brow. "Tone? Maybe the problem isn't tone. Maybe people just aren't used to someone like me refusing to play along anymore." He leaned forward slightly. "I've spent my life being told how to smile, what to say, how to behave. If I sound sharp now, it's because I've earned the right not to pander." A soft gasp rippled through the audience. Tamron blinked once, her poise unwavering, though the air had thickened. "I understand wanting to control your own story," she said, "but do you ever worry that in defending yourself so strongly, you risk alienating people who actually want to support you?" Harry's laugh was clipped and cold. "People who truly support me don't need hand-holding. If my honesty offends them, they were never supporters to begin with." The silence that followed was heavier this time. Even those who'd cheered earlier now sat still, their admiration cooling. Tamron's half-smile remained, but her eyes had hardened. "That's one way to look at it," she said lightly. "Another is that people want connection, not correction. Do you think you sometimes underestimate how your words land?" Harry tilted his head, voice measured but disdainful. "People spend too much time worrying about how words land, and not enough time hearing what's actually being said. Misinterpretation isn't my burden. No applause this time, only silence." Tamron folded her hands neatly, the picture of calm. "If your goal is healing and moving forward," she said, "why do so many of your public statements return to grievances from your past? Some might say it feels less like healing and more like reopening wounds." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Grievances," he echoed. "I call it truth. If people are uncomfortable with it, maybe they should ask themselves why." His arrogance was unmistakable now. He leaned back again, chin slightly lifted, daring anyone to challenge him. Tamron inhaled slowly, her professionalism intact though her patience was thinning. "Our viewers sent in many questions," she said. One recurring theme was family. "Do you see a future where reconciliation happens publicly? Or will that distance remain permanent?" Harry's smirk returned. "Reconciliation isn't a performance," he said coolly. "It's a process. Whether the public sees it or not is irrelevant. People are obsessed with my family because it's easier than reflecting on their own." This time, the audience shifted audibly. A few clapped out of habit, but most stayed silent, sensing that the once relatable prince had crossed into arrogance. Tamron nodded slowly, holding his gaze. "I see," she said softly. "That's certainly a strong perspective." "Strong," Harry repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, strong and unapologetic. Which is probably why I'm here, and why people can't stop talking about me." The line was meant to impress, but it dropped like a stone. Even the polite applause sign above the audience blinked off, as if embarrassed. For Tamron, something shifted. The questions she'd prepared no longer mattered. The air had changed, charged, raw, unpredictable. The next segment opened with subdued clapping. The warmth from earlier was gone, replaced by tension that everyone, the crew, the audience, even viewers at home, could feel. Tamron smiled into the camera, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "We're back with Prince Harry," she said, "and we've been having a very candid conversation." Harry leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, twirling the mic cord between his fingers with a smug ease. "Candid," he echoed. "I prefer honest. Brutal honesty, if necessary. It's about time people got used to it." A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. Tamron folded her hands. "Then let's continue with honesty. You've spoken about mental health, family, and your mission to change the system. But some critics argue your advocacy often circles back to your personal grievances. How do you respond to those who say your story has become bigger than your cause?" Harry let out a sharp laugh. "Critics, people who risk nothing yet dissect everything. They don't deserve a response, Tamron. And if you're repeating their words, maybe you don't either." A loud gasp rippled through the audience. Tamron blinked, her smile faltering for the first time, but her voice stayed firm. "I'm asking because our viewers want clarity," she said. "Do you feel your personal story strengthens your advocacy or overshadows it?" Harry tilted his head, calculating. "My story is the advocacy. Without me, none of these conversations would exist. People don't tune in for generic speeches. They tune in for me. And frankly, Tamron, they need me." The arrogance struck like a gong. A woman in the second row bit her lip, unsure whether to clap. Tamron's composure tightened. "Some might say that sounds self-important," she said carefully. "Some might," Harry replied, flashing a grin. "And they'd be right. It is important. And if it centers on me, that's because I'm the one carrying it." The weight of his words dropped heavy in the room. Tamron's tone cooled. "Carrying it alone?" she asked. "What about your wife, your family, your team, the people who help drive your work? Don't they deserve recognition too?" Harry's smirk faded into something colder. "Of course they do. But let's be honest, they follow my lead. Without me, there's no spotlight, no microphone, no movement. That's just reality." The audience groaned softly, disbelief and discomfort mingling. The image of humility was collapsing in real time. Tamron straightened. "That's quite a statement," she said crisply. "Let me pivot. You've criticized the press, yet relied on it for your platform. At what point does criticism become hypocrisy?" Harry's eyes hardened. "Hypocrisy? That word gets tossed around by people who don't understand leverage. The press created me, yes, but they don't own me. I use them now, not the other way around." No laughs, no applause, only silence. Tamron exhaled slowly, the faintest flicker of her patience cracking. "So, to be clear," she said, voice measured, "you don't see any contradiction in condemning the press while simultaneously profiting from them?" Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and cutting. "Do you see contradiction in hosting a show built on ratings while pretending it's about journalism?" He paused, then smiled faintly. "We all play the game, Tamron. Some of us just play it better." The audience erupted in gasps. Tamron's lips pressed together, hands tightening in her lap. For a beat, she said nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with calm precision, she replied, "I've built my career on respect and integrity. I don't ambush my guests, and I don't insult them." Harry's smile sharpened like a blade. "And yet, here we are." The words hit like a slap. For the first time, Tamron's smile vanished completely. The cameras caught everything. The rigid set of her shoulders, the flicker of anger in her eyes, the stillness that gripped the room. "Let me ask you something personal." "Then," she said, her voice lower now, almost a warning, "you've spoken about wanting to protect your family. But by exposing private matters so publicly, haven't you endangered those very relationships? How does that align with your values?" Harry gave a cold laugh. "You're asking the wrong question. The right one is, Why should I protect relationships that never protected me? A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Louder this time. Someone in the back muttered, "Wow." Tamron's composure faltered just slightly, her brow tightening, lips pressed into a thin line. "That's a painful answer," she said softly. "For them, and for you." Harry shrugged, unapologetic. "Painful, yes, but true, and I won't apologize for truth." The atmosphere was electric now, the kind of charged silence that hums before a storm. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to break or let the moment burn. Tamron leaned forward, her tone tightening, eyes sharp. "Truth is powerful," she said evenly, "but so is humility. Do you ever ask yourself if the way you deliver your truth, the way you speak to people, might be costing you the empathy you say you want?" Harry's smirk deepened, his voice dripping with superiority. "Tamron, empathy is overrated. Respect is what matters. And if people can't respect me for speaking plainly, their empathy was worthless to begin with." The audience fell silent again. The polite applause that had punctuated earlier exchanges was gone. Tamron drew a slow breath. For a moment she looked down at her notes, then back up, her gaze steady, her tone calm but edged with something raw. "Maybe," she said, "but respect has to be earned. And I think you might be forgetting that." Harry leaned back, arms folded, smirk unwavering. "Or maybe," he said coolly, "the world just isn't ready for me." The arrogance was absolute. And in that moment, everyone knew. The storm had finally arrived. The air in the studio felt thick enough to choke. For over 30 minutes, Tamron Hall had held her composure, poised, professional, unshaken. Even as Prince Harry turned every question into a showcase of ego. But now, as he lounged back with his arms crossed and that smug grin still in place, something in her broke. She leaned forward, her voice steady but hard as steel. "You know, Harry, you keep talking about truth and respect," she said. "But what I'm hearing is entitlement. What I'm seeing is a man so wrapped up in his own grievances that he can't recognize when he's lost the room." A wave of gasps swept through the audience, a shock that rolled like thunder. For the first time, Harry's smirk wavered. "Lost the room?" he scoffed, trying to mask it with a laugh. "Tamron, with respect, the room has never mattered to me. I've spent my life performing for rooms that were never satisfied. I'm not here to win approval." Tamron's eyes locked onto his, all trace of a smile gone. "No," she said quietly. "You're here to lecture, to dismiss, to act like every question is beneath you. And frankly," her voice rose slightly, the steel unmistakable now, "I'm done with it." The silence that followed was explosive. Even the crew stopped moving. Every camera, every lens was frozen between them. Harry leaned forward, tone sharp, almost taunting. "Done? Because I didn't bow to your questions? Because I didn't give you the sound bites you wanted?" Tamron shook her head, her voice rising with controlled fury. "No, Harry, because every answer you've given has dripped with arrogance. You mock the press, you mock the audience, you mock me, and you call it truth. But let's be honest." She paused, the weight of her words filling the air. "This isn't truth, and it's not service. This is ego." The audience erupted into applause, sharp, spontaneous, and defiant. For the first time that night, the silence broke like glass. Harry's face flushed, his jaw tightening. "You don't know me," he snapped, his voice cold. "You don't know what I've survived." Tamron didn't flinch. "You're right," she said evenly. "I don't, but I know arrogance when I see it. And I know the difference between a man sharing his truth and a man hiding behind his title to escape accountability." Her words sliced through the air. Harry shifted in his seat, his confidence wavering. Tamron pressed on, her tone unwavering. "You're not a working royal anymore. You chose to leave. Yet you carry yourself as though the world still owes you reverence. But this—" She gestured around the studio. "This isn't Buckingham Palace. This is my show. And in my house, respect goes both ways." The audience clapped again, louder, prouder. Harry's eyes darkened. "Are you suggesting I don't deserve respect?" he demanded. "I'm saying respect isn't a birthright," Tamron fired back. It's earned. And the way you've spoken tonight? You've done nothing to earn it. The words hit harder than any scripted question could. Harry opened his mouth, then closed it again, his composure slipping. Tamron leaned back, decision made. I think this interview is over. A collective gasp swept through the studio. Harry blinked in disbelief. Excuse me? You heard me, she said firmly. Prince or not, I don't allow guests to come on my stage and belittle me, or this audience. You want to lecture people? Write another book. But you won't do it here. Security! The word hung in the air like a gavel. The audience erupted, some cheering, others frozen in disbelief. Two stagehands stepped forward, but Harry stood before they reached him, fury radiating off him. This is outrageous, he hissed. You'll regret treating me this way. Tamron didn't move. No, Harry. What's outrageous is believing the rules don't apply to you. Goodbye. Applause thundered through the room. Relief, vindication, catharsis. Cameras caught every second as Harry ripped off his microphone, tossed it onto the chair, and stormed off the stage without looking back. When the studio door slammed behind him, Tamron turned toward the audience, her poise restored. Ladies and gentlemen, she said calmly, sometimes conversations take turns we don't expect. But on this show, one thing never changes. Respect. No matter who sits in that chair. The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. The band swelled, the credits rolled, and the moment became legend. What began as a simple interview had ended in chaos. Prince Harry storming off, Tamron Hall standing her ground, and television history capturing it all. He came looking for control. He walked away stripped of it. And that's how one of the most explosive daytime interviews of the decade came to an end.